The following is a paid program by Zola Levitt Ministries. From time immemorial, forces of darkness have amassed and threatened the Jews with extinction. In every generation, however, God provided a leader who would shine the light of God's faithfulness. Hanukkah, the Jewish Feast of Lights, harks back to a time when Judaism was threatened with extinction. A hero emerged, lit the lamp of hope, and delivered Israel. From generation to generation, Jews light lamps in their homes to commemorate the victory and to retell the story of the Feast of Lights.
Hearty shalom to all of you. Jeffrey Seif here, pleased to welcome you to a very, very special edition of Zola Levitt Presents, presenting to you from a very, very special place. Behind me, Jerusalem. Underneath me, the Mount of Olives. Hey, many preachers can't tell you they're coming from there. We open up our Bibles and talk, but here I'm coming to you from the Bible land to tell a story. To get some help in the telling of that story, let me explain this. Give you a little Hebrew lesson here. It's called a menorah. In it are a variety of candles that are lit, 8 in total, to commemorate a very, very special event that took place here many, many years ago. A miraculous event. In fact, Jews say, Nesh Gadol Hoyashem, that a great miracle happened. And what was that miracle? Many years ago, this land was overrun by the Syrians. It seems there's a lot of armies, a lot of soldiers have slept through this part of the world, and little Israel has been caught in the crossfires from time immemorial. Well, there was a time when the Syrians overran Jerusalem. They, in the process, overtook the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. They dedicated it to the service of a pagan god and desecrated the Holy of Holies, affected what we call the desolating sacrilege by offering swine's flesh in the place that was the Lord's interior room in the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, in the Holy of Holies. Well, God fortuitously, providentially gave a victory to Israelites that wanted to stand up and contend for the real estate, in the wake of which the temple was rededicated. There was only a little bit of oil, but it lasted for the 8 days needed to purify the temple complex. And annually, Jewish people commemorate that event. Well, let me give you some Hebrew words here. Choshech. Choshech is a Hebrew word for darkness. Or is a Hebrew word for light. If you were to visit a synagogue, you discovered that there is a light that hangs over the Aron Kodesh, the ark where the Torah scrolls are kept. This keeping a memorial light going has its roots in the temple complex, and it's something that's accentuated particularly during the Feast of Hanukkah. In Bible days, oil was used. In synagogues today, they used electricity. The manufacture of the oil was very special, which reminds me, here at the base of the Mount of Olives is a place called Gethsemane. Gat Shmini in Hebrew. Gat means press. Shemen means oil. The process of squeezing the oil out of the olives is very fascinating. There's an art form to the science, in fact, and it's taken very, very, very seriously. In fact, the olive itself is a major crop here. In fact, think of this. I'm coming to you from what's called the Mount of Olives, and there are trees round about. And in Bible days, in bygone days, there was a special press there at the base, Gath Shmini. You know, you would press the olive rather, and then the life-giving oil would come out. And if you can imagine that, if you can recall one night, the Lord himself, Yeshua, Jesus that is, was there ready to give his life. And you ever heard the expression sweat and blood? Well, you remember how he did that, how he was under the pressure, agonizing. Lord, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thy will be done. And he's sweating blood in the process. Seems like in different ways, different people have sweat blood in this part of the world. The story of Hanukkah, as I'd said a moment ago, harks back to a time when the Jewish state was decimated. It seems to happen door to door, from generation to generation. There's something about this real estate that draws conflict. Just to look at it geographically, frankly, it should really come as no surprise in that Israel itself is the natural land bridge that connects Africa, Asia, Europe. So armies that are looking to, advance are going to come through this part of the world. And if you're looking at real estate that has seen various civilizations come and go, always this little parcel's caught in the crosshairs. The Hanukkah story tells one such time, but there are a variety of stories, by the way, a variety of biblical holidays that talk about how the forces of Choshech, darkness, are endeavoring to extinguish the voice of Or, the voice of light. Passover tells of a time when a certain nation state emerged in Egypt that was hell-bent on destroying Jews. The Jewish holiday of Purim, revolving around the book of Esther, talks about a time in Persia how a civilization was bent on destroying Jews. Hanukkah tells a story of how the Syrians were bent on destroying the Jews, and they came ever so close. Jews remember that particular event, in fact, all those holidays and all those struggles. There's a word in Hebrew, zachar, which means to remember. And we're a people that has a mind of history. And when we open up the Bible, as I'm going to do in the next segment, we're going to see how various forces is marshaled to extinguish the Israelite light and then to diminish the testimony of the God of Israel. In every generation, his saving power is evidenced, and I want to consider prophetically the destiny of this land. Hanukkah is but one story of how the Syrians overran, a small ragtag militia decided to stand up, and God gave them great victory. And it seems that in different ways, in different days, different people are inspirited with a mind to take such a stand, to contend for this land, for the Jewish right in the real estate, and for God's plans on the land. Well, I want to tell that story. Hanukkah tells that story. Jeremiah is going to tell that story. And in the process of so doing, we're going to hear God's Mideast peace plan. Hanukkah, a story of deliverance, a story that's rooted in the biblical narrative.
For insightful perspectives of Israel and Bible prophecy, ask for our free monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. When you call, be sure to ask for our free catalog with the latest videos, books, and music. Our correspondence course, the Institute for Jewish Christian Studies, includes reading packets, teaching CDs, and mail-in tests. You may want to join us on an upcoming tour of Israel or Petra, or cruise the Mediterranean visiting Greece and Ephesus. Please contact us for more information.
Some of this may be new to you, but let me ask if you can finish this little line. You ready? Finish it, if you will. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I bet you heard that, didn't you? Well, this is a shining box here. I earlier spoke about a menorah. Jews light this special light stand annually for a period of 8 days, and the menorah comes in various formations. This one is a beautiful piece. The candles are lit inside. There's one up here, it's called the shamash, and you use the shamash, the servant, to light the others. There's different configurations, but what's important in the Jewish world is for every Jewish home to let that little light shine. You know, in the Christian church, there's old songs, give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. The whole idea of light shining in darkness is so germane to the biblical story that we're to shine as lights in a darkened world is a biblical concept. The forces of darkness, however, the devil's called the prince of darkness, and the extinguishing the light is played out in different ways. I want you to go with me now to the book of Jeremiah. This story predates the Hanukkah story, of which the Hanukkah is just a continuation of it in some sense, as you'll see. In the 33rd chapter, God is on record here talking about his preserving power for his people in this land. And it's the story of preservation that's commemorated in the Hanukkah story. We're told in chapter 33, "Thus says the Lord, if you can break my covenant with a day and my covenant with the night, so that there will not be day and night in their season, then my covenant will also be broken with David, my servant." You know the story, the night comes and the stars come. The day comes and the sun comes. It seems that God's always got a light shining. There's a very predictable formation in the cycle of nature. Very, very predictable, very established, immovable. And the Lord says, you know, my covenant with David is something akin to that. He goes on to say, my covenant with David will be broken if that order of the lights and the nights and the days can be broken. And it can't be broken. God's love for David and his descendants and his land can't be broken. We're told in verse 24 then, have you not considered what these people are saying? What are they saying? God has cast them off, the Jewish people. Thus they have despised my people, as if they should no more be a nation before them. You know, you have here in the Jeremiah text, you know, people are saying God's cast away the Jews. Paul was very explicit in saying, may it never be, but many in the church say, let it be. Go figure. But Jeremiah is on record here. The Lord is speaking through him and to him, you know, saying, listen, a lot of people are saying God's cast off the Jews. May it never be. The Jewish presence is as fixed as the sun and the moon and the stars. He says in verse 25, if my covenant is not with the day and the night, and if I have not appointed the ordinances of heaven and earth, then I will cast away the descendants of Jacob and David. There's something fixed, there's something established. And let me tell you something. When God establishes something, the forces of darkness are bent on uprooting it. And hence there's a struggle. It happens in different ways, in different generations, different empires, different religions. It's all about snuffing out a light. You and I, friends, have to prayerfully and carefully participate in keeping the light burning, keeping the torch lit. It's so important in the biblical text. Jeremiah says it over and again in different ways, and he appeals to the night lights and the lights by day to say, listen, it's a symbol of God's keeping power. And so, as I'd said earlier, Jews in the Hanukkah season, when we remember how they tried to kill us, we light lights to commemorate. I have pleasant memories of Hanukkah. It is, in effect, the Jewish Christmas. And the reason why I say that, Christmas is celebrated one day, Hanukkah is celebrated 8 days, and I'm pleased to inform you that in Jewish homes, the kiddos get gifts for every one of them. How would you like to have Christmas for every day of the week and then some? Oh, it was special. And I remember, because we celebrated gift giving, it was a happy season, because we remembered that though hell has an assignment against us, God has a plan for us. Not just for us, the Jewish people, let me say, with the Bible in hand, but through the Jews to all of yous. It's not just about redeeming a people in a land, but it's God's plan to spread his light over planet Earth. I'm going to roll out of this segment in a moment and come back and explain that a little more, but let me let you know that the Hanukkah story, the dedication story, the preservation story of the Jewish people isn't just for Jews, it's for all of yous. And I'll get to that story in a moment.
My suggestion, come to Israel. You'll enjoy it.
This 9-10-day trip has totally revolutionized the way I look at
the profound meaning and the history behind everything. And
we've seen a lot of great things. We've learned so much.
What could be more special than coming to God's land with God's people?
If you want to fall in love with Israel and God's chosen people, I invite you to come. You will not be disappointed.
Join us in Israel for a trip of a lifetime.
I want to go back to Jeremiah in a moment, but let me take you to something that's a little more familiar. I want you to turn in your Bibles, please, to the Gospel of John, the 10th chapter, and I want you to see how Jesus, the Torah-observant Jew that he was, is participating in the celebration of Hanukkah. Isn't that something? We're told in John chapter 10, verse 22, now it was the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem. And dedication in English is Hanukkah in Hebrew. It was Chag, the feast of Hanukkah. And we're told that Yeshua, Jesus, was in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. And that we're told in verse 23 that Yeshua was walking in the temple. You know, his feet are treading there. And it's the season when Jewish people remember the dedication of the temple. Now let me tell you, the light in the temple, there's something very, very unique. I'm not an architect, but I know this, that the way windows are constructed, it's designed in such a way typically to bring light into the house. You have skylights, there's different mechanisms in architecture. The name of the game is to bring light in. But what's interesting about the house that Yeshua was walking around in, and Jewish literature is very deliberate in explaining this, what was unique about it was that the sills were designed in such a way to displace light. In other words, it was designed that the light that was lit on the hill should be spread forth from the hill, which is one of the reasons, by the way, when the priest, the Kohen Gadol, Aaron, you can recall, when he would bless the people and say, may the Lord bless you and keep you, he would extend his hands with this symbol. And it was in effect to indicate rays of light. He would have the Beit HaMikdash behind him, the holy place, and he would there bless. And it's the imagery of rays of light, symbolic. It's not only built into his gesturing, but it was actually built into the facility itself. Remember, Jesus is on record speaking of a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. But he references a light that's put on a stand to give light to all. Well, there's something about that here in the Hanukkah story, to be sure, because it's all celebrated around light. And as I noted here in the 10th chapter of the Johannine Gospel, Jesus is there in the Feast of Lights. He's walking around the temple complex, and what kind of light does he share here? He says in verse 28 that there's a gift on the table. He says, I give eternal life, and that no one will be able to snatch my people out of my hand. The promise here is to those that follow. Yeshua, Jesus, previously in the chapter, referenced himself as a shepherd who is in effect going to lay down his life for the sheep. He mentioned what Jews know all too well, certainly when remembering the Hanukkah story. He remembers that there are wolves that come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And that's exactly what Antiochus Epiphanes, the Syrian, did when he came here and overran Jerusalem, stealing, killing, and destroying. But Yeshua said, I came that they might have life and life abundant. And just before that, by the way, he referenced to the light story, the light of the world. He, in the 9th chapter, gave light to the blind. He opened the eyes so there could be light, there could be vision. And there in the 10th chapter, Jesus referencing himself as a shepherd, sheep walking low to the ground and noted as having poor vision. The shepherd, in effect, gives eyes, or he gives light to the sheep. He is able to then say, this is the way, walk in it, as he goes before them and leads them to good pasture. He, in effect, displaces the darkness and leads them to good pastures that they couldn't otherwise find. Oh, the imagery here is fascinating, by the way, and the story is wonderful, especially in this precarious world. Behind me once stood the temple complex in Jerusalem, and now there's an Islamic shrine behind me. Bellowing out of loudspeakers are Islamist clerics calling individuals to prayer. A fascinating world, a confluence of religions. What kind of light can come out of this world? Well, there is a plan of redemption on the table. Certainly we know from the Hanukkah story that God redeemed his people of Israel as a nation state, as a religious system. We know as well from the Jesus story told here on the Feast of Hanukkah that Yeshua is all about redeeming individuals. Of course, he's speaking to Jewish individuals, but as I said a moment ago, it's not just about Jews. The redemption story noted in Jeremiah, the fixed plan of God's abiding love for his people isn't just for his people, the Jewish people, because the truth of the matter is, God made you mankind, not just Jewish kind. It says in the biblical text, Vayomer Elohim na'aseh adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. My cousins, the Arab friends of mine, individuals that aren't Semitic, but other people groups, were all made in God's image, and there's a spark, and there's a plan to redeem not just Jews, but yous, and it's noted. It's noted. It's broadcast in the Hebrew Bible, God's plan to redeem the Arab peoples that are Muslim states now. Round about me now is a season of prayer, a calling of faithful Muslims to turn their hearts toward Allah. Did you know that the same God in Jeremiah who promised a fixed plan and a steady purpose for the Jewish people, do you know that he also was explicit in informing that he has a plan for the Muslim people, for the Arab people? You're saying, Jeffrey, could it be? Behind me, as I'd said, is a call to prayer for the Islamist faithful. Is there a call of God on them? Yes. I want you to turn with me to Jeremiah chapter 48, verse 47. There's devastations in the world, but you know what he says? I will bring back the displaced, the captives of Moab. Moab in yesterday is Jordan of today. He says, I will bring them back. Moabite people, Arabic people will be reconciled to him and to their land. He says, I will bring them back. When? In the latter days. In chapter 49, verse 6, much the same, he says, and I will bring them back. Who? The captives of Ammon. The Ammonites dwelt just above the Moabites, neighbors, if you will, in a land that was Jordan, that is Jordan today, but it went by another name yesterday. God says, I'm going to call you back. Oh, I want to look at the Feast of Light story, and I'm going to continue it after the break and explore how there's a unification motif. God accomplishing his will and ways on planet Earth and gathering the exiles of Israel, the Jewish people, non-Jewish people, and bringing peace on earth and goodwill toward men. Oh, let the light shine. We're told that the word is a light unto our path. And what does the word declare in Jeremiah? He says that he is going to redeem his people. In chapter 48, we spoke of Moab, and then Ammon, Edom follows, and then in verse 39 of chapter 49, he speaks of the Elamites being restored. Elam in antiquity is Persia. We're in that part of the world where Iran stands. God has a peace plan, friends. Listen, let me close here in Jeremiah 51, verse 10. Come, let us declare in Zion the work of the Lord our God. There is a work that's going to be unfolding on planet Earth, a redemptive work, when his kingdom comes and his will is done. And the story of Hanukkah reminds us in every generation how God watches over his word, he watches over his covenant people. Let me encourage you, if you're a natural Jew, to make peace with the God of Israel through the Messiah. If you're not of Jewish extract, let me tell you, you can be grafted in and you can be part of God's peace plan. And what a plan it is. Thank you for exploring it with me. And as you go now, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our offer on this program, Zola Levitt's most requested teaching, The 7 Feasts of Israel, the book and the DVD, a complete explanation of the holy days God gave Moses on Mount Sinai, and how each was fulfilled by our Lord in Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles. These celebrations comprise one of the most fascinating studies of biblical types and shadows. Ask for the book or the DVD, The 7 Feasts of Israel. Also, please call toll-free or write to receive our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. It's absolutely free and contains insightful article and news commentary with a refreshing perspective you won't get from the mainstream media. The Levitt Letter is also available at levitt.com, along with current and archive TV programs, our national airing schedule, and much more. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you. This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.